Most people believe their problem is fear, but fear is not the real issue. The real issue is hesitation. We live in a world where the mind is constantly talking, questioning, analyzing, warning, doubting, and the longer we listen, the more distant life feels. Doubt becomes comfortable. It gives us a strange sense of safety, as if by thinking long enough we can avoid pain altogether. But Priyanka Chopra teaches us something quietly revolutionary. Life does not respond to thought, it responds to action. You see, the mind is designed to imagine possibilities, not to live them. When we try to live inside our thoughts, we begin to feel stuck, uncertain, unworthy. We wait for confidence to arrive before we move, not realizing that confidence is a result of movement, not a requirement. The truth is simple, yet unsettling. There is no moment called ready. There is only now. Just as you do not learn to swim by standing at the edge of the pool, you do not learn to live by endlessly preparing. You step in, you feel the water, you adjust. And suddenly, what once felt terrifying becomes natural. Doubt is not a warning sign. It is a signal that you are standing at the edge of something meaningful. Life is not asking you to be perfect. It is asking you to participate, to stop rehearsing and start experiencing, to stop imagining yourself in the future and begin expressing yourself in the present. When you stop doubting and start doing, something extraordinary happens. The noise quiets, the fear dissolves, and you remember who you are. Not someone waiting, but someone becoming. Most people believe their greatest enemy is fear, but fear itself is not the real problem. Fear is natural. Fear is honest. The real obstacle is hesitation. That subtle pause where life is asking you to move, and the mind insists on waiting. Waiting for clarity, waiting for confidence, waiting for permission. We live inside a constant stream of thoughts. The mind talks and talks, analyzing every possible outcome, rehearsing conversations that may never happen, predicting failures that do not yet exist. And slowly, without noticing, we begin to confuse thinking with living. Doubt becomes familiar, comfortable even. It feels productive, as if staying still is a form of control. But here is the quiet truth that Priyanka Chopra points toward. Life does not respond to thought. Life responds to action. The mind is a wonderful tool, but a terrible master. It was never designed to give you certainty. It was designed to imagine possibilities. And when you ask it to guarantee success before you move, it will always say no. Because the mind cannot predict life. It can only describe its fears. So you wait. And in waiting, you begin to doubt yourself. Not because you are incapable, but because movement has stopped. Confidence, you see, is not something you discover first. It is something that appears after you begin. Like balance on a bicycle, it comes only when you are already moving. There is no moment called ready. There never was. There is only now, unfolding, imperfect, alive. The idea of readiness is one of the mind's most convincing illusions. It promises safety, but delivers stagnation. Think of how you learned anything meaningful. You did not wait to be fearless. You acted while afraid. You did not wait to be certain. You moved while unsure. And through that movement, fear softened. Uncertainty clarified. Life responded. Doubt is not a sign that something is wrong, it is a sign that something matters. It appears when you stand at the edge of growth, where the familiar ends and possibility begins. The mistake is not feeling doubt. The mistake is believing it deserves obedience. Life is not a performance you rehearse backstage until perfection arrives. It is happening now, whether you participate or not. And the more you postpone action, the louder the inner noise becomes. Not because you are failing, but because you are resisting your own movement. When you take even the smallest step, something remarkable happens. The mind quiets, not because the answers arrive, but because the questions lose their power. Action grounds you in reality, and reality is always simpler than imagination. You were never meant to be flawless. You were meant to be expressive, to explore, to stumble forward. To learn by doing, not by waiting. The moment you stop doubting and start doing, you realize something deeply freeing. You were never broken. You were never behind. You were simply standing still, listening to a voice that was never meant to lead your life. And when you move, imperfectly, honestly, bravely, life moves with you. There is a strange habit the human mind has. It believes that by thinking long enough, it can avoid uncertainty. It tells you that one more thought, one more plan, one more delay will finally make everything safe. But life does not work that way. Life is not solved like a puzzle. It is lived like a dance, and a dance only exists when there is movement. Most people are not stuck because they lack talent or opportunity. They are stuck because they are waiting for an internal signal that never comes. A feeling of absolute confidence, a guarantee that things will work out, a sign that says, now you are ready. And while they wait, life quietly passes by. What Priyanka Chopra reminds us without shouting is that certainty is not the starting point. Action is. The mind loves doubt because doubt feels intelligent. It sounds reasonable. It says, be careful. Think again. What if this goes wrong? And yet, notice how rarely doubt protects you from real pain. Most of the pain comes not from what you did, but from what you never allowed yourself to try. The mind imagines failure in dramatic detail, but it never imagines regret with the same clarity. It never shows you the slow ache of unrealized potential, the quiet question that returns years later asking, what if I had moved when I felt the call? You see, confidence is not a personality trait. It is a side effect. It emerges only after you take responsibility for movement. When you act, even clumsily, something shifts inside you. You stop living in imagination and return to experience. And experience is always more forgiving than thought. There is no clean beginning, no perfect timing. Life begins in the middle, in uncertainty, in imperfection, in risk. Waiting for the right moment is like waiting for the ocean to become still before you swim. The waves do not stop. You learn by entering the water. Doubt often appears right before growth, not because you are unprepared, but because you are expanding beyond what is familiar. The familiar always feels safe, even when it is limiting. The unfamiliar feels dangerous, even when it is necessary. The mind confuses comfort with truth. But life does not reward comfort. It responds to participation. When you move, reality meets you halfway. New information appears. New strength reveals itself. Problems that once felt overwhelming become specific and manageable. Not because they disappeared, but because you're no longer fighting them in your imagination. Action simplifies. Overthinking complicates. The smallest step forward has more power than 1,000 perfect plans. A single honest attempt teaches you more than endless preparation ever could. And once you experience this, doubt begins to lose its authority. Not because it vanishes, but because you stop obeying it. You realize that fear does not mean stop. It means pay attention. It means something important is happening. Life is not asking you to prove your worth before you begin. It is asking you to express it through movement, to trust that clarity comes from engagement, not isolation, to understand that mistakes are not evidence of failure, but proof of participation. You were never meant to arrive fully formed. You were meant to unfold, and unfolding requires motion. When you stop doubting and start doing, you do not suddenly become fearless. You become present. And presence is far more powerful than confidence. Presence connects you to life as it is, not as you imagine it might be. And in that presence, something profound becomes clear. You are not here to wait for permission. You are here to move. And through movement, to discover who you already are. The mind has a curious way of convincing you that standing still is a form of wisdom. It whispers that patience means delay, that intelligence means hesitation, that safety lies in endless evaluation. And so, you pause, you observe, you wait. Not because life has told you to stop, but because the mind has learned to fear movement. What Priyanka Chopra reflects through her journey is not the absence of doubt, but the refusal to let doubt decide. Because doubt, when you look closely, is not an enemy. It is simply energy without direction. And when that energy is not expressed through action, it turns inward and becomes confusion. Most people believe they must silence doubt before they begin. But doubt does not disappear through resistance. It dissolves through engagement. The moment you act, doubt changes its shape. It no longer controls the story. It becomes background noise, present but powerless. The mind prefers imagined futures to lived moments. In imagination, everything feels intense and overwhelming. risks grow larger, mistakes feel permanent. But in reality, life is far more fluid. Things adjust, people adapt, you adapt. Reality is not as rigid as thought makes it seem. Overthinking creates the illusion of depth, but action creates actual understanding. You can think about a path endlessly, but you only learn its terrain by walking it. Each step reveals what no amount of planning ever could. There is a deep misunderstanding about confidence. People believe confidence comes from knowing the outcome, but true confidence comes from trusting your ability to respond. You don't need certainty about where you're going. You need faith in your capacity to move when the ground shifts. Waiting for clarity before action is like waiting for the sunrise before opening your eyes. Clarity comes after you begin to see. It is born from interaction, from feedback, from presence. Doubt often grows louder when you are close to something meaningful, not because you are wrong, but because you are approaching the edge of the familiar. The familiar, even when painful, feels safe. The unknown, even when promising, feels threatening. The mind confuses predictability with security. But life does not expand through predictability. It expands through participation. When you act, you enter a conversation with life. You speak through movement, and life answers through experience. Each response teaches you something new. About the world, about others, about yourself. This dialogue cannot happen while you are waiting. Small actions carry immense power. A single step forward interrupts the loop of doubt. It shifts you from imagination into embodiment. You feel yourself here, now, engaged. And in that engagement, the question changes from what if I fail to what is actually happening. Failure, when it appears, is rarely the catastrophe the mind predicts. It is information. It refines you. It sharpens awareness. And most importantly, it keeps you moving. Life does not require perfection. It requires presence. It does not ask you to eliminate fear. It asks you to walk with it. Fear becomes lighter when it is carried forward instead of fought against. The tragedy is not making mistakes. The tragedy is remaining unmoved by your own potential. Regret grows not from action, but from avoidance. From knowing you felt the impulse to move and chose comfort instead. When you stop doubting and start doing, you don't become someone new. You return to something ancient and natural, the instinct to engage, to explore, to respond. You stop asking life for permission and begin cooperating with it. And in that cooperation, something quietly liberating happens. The pressure to be certain dissolves. The need to control fades. You realize you were never meant to have all the answers. You were meant to take the next step. Movement reveals meaning. Action restores trust. And life, once again, begins to feel like something you are part of, not something you are watching from a distance. There is a subtle tension that lives inside almost everyone, a quiet pull between what is felt and what is postponed. You sense a direction, a possibility, a movement wanting to happen, and almost immediately the mind steps in to negotiate. It asks for reasons, assurances, guarantees. It asks you to slow down, to be careful, to wait just a little longer. And without realizing it, you begin to live more in preparation than in participation. The mind believes that delay equals wisdom. It convinces you that stillness is safety, that motion is reckless. Yet life itself never pauses. It flows continuously, inviting you to join whether you feel ready or not. The tragedy is not that people fail. It is that they spend so much time standing at the edge of life, analyzing the water, that they never feel its current. What Priyanka Chopra embodies is not perfection or certainty, but willingness. A willingness to step forward before the path is fully visible, because clarity does not precede movement. It follows it. We often imagine that doubt is a problem to be solved, a flaw to be removed, but doubt is simply the mind's response to openness. When you approach something unfamiliar, the mind reacts by creating noise. It warns, compares, remembers past disappointments, projects future embarrassment. This is not because you are incapable, but because the mind is designed to protect what it already knows. Yet growth requires leaving what is known. The mistake is not hearing doubt. The mistake is mistaking it for truth. Doubt speaks in questions, but life answers only through experience. No amount of thinking will give. you the answers that movement provides. Thinking can outline possibilities, but action reveals reality. There is a strange comfort in imagining outcomes without engaging them. In imagination, failure feels dramatic and final. In reality, it is rarely so severe. Life adjusts, you adjust. What felt overwhelming in thought becomes manageable in action. But this can only be discovered by stepping in. People wait for confidence as if it were a signal sent from the future. But confidence is not a message, it is a memory. It is built from moments when you acted despite uncertainty and survived. Each step forward leaves behind evidence that you are capable. Without those steps, confidence has nothing to grow from. Waiting feels responsible, but often it is avoidance wearing a thoughtful disguise. It feels mature to say, I'm not ready yet. Yet readiness is not a condition that arrives, it is a decision that is made. Life does not demand that you be fearless, it asks only that you be present. Presence means engaging with what is happening instead of what might happen. It means trusting that you can respond, even if you cannot predict. This trust is not blind optimism, it is a recognition of your adaptability. When you move, even imperfectly, the inner dialogue softens. Not because the mind becomes quiet, but because it is no longer in charge. Action grounds you in the body, in time, in reality. You stop negotiating with imagined futures and begin relating to what is actually here. There is a deep relief in this, a sense of returning to something natural. Children do not wait to feel qualified before they explore. They move first and understand later. Somewhere along the way, we learn to reverse this order, and in doing so, we lose momentum. The cost of doubt is not immediate pain, it is delayed life. It is the slow accumulation of unlived moments, untested abilities, unexpressed energy. And this cost is far greater than any single mistake. When you stop doubting and start doing, you do not eliminate uncertainty, you befriend it. You recognize that uncertainty is not the enemy of life, but its condition. Movement does not remove risk, it gives risk meaning. And in that movement, something quietly profound happens. Life stops feeling like a question you must answer correctly and begins to feel like a conversation you are finally willing to join. There is an unspoken agreement many people make with themselves without ever realizing it. They decide that one day when they feel more prepared, more confident, more certain, they will begin. Until then, they observe life from a safe distance. They think about it, plan for it, imagine it, but they do not fully step into it. This agreement feels harmless at first, even responsible. But over time, it quietly shapes a life of hesitation. The mind is very convincing when it argues for delay. It presents caution as intelligence and waiting as maturity. It replays past mistakes and projects future failures, constructing stories that sound reasonable enough to obey. Yet these stories are not warnings from life, they are echoes of the mind trying to preserve familiarity. What Priyanka Chopra demonstrates through her path is not fearlessness, but commitment to movement. Again and again, she steps into spaces where outcomes are uncertain, where criticism is possible, where comfort is not guaranteed. Not because she knows everything will work out, but because she understands that staying still is its own form of risk. There is a common belief that action should come after understanding. That once you fully understand who you are and where you are going, movement will feel natural. But understanding is not a prerequisite for action, it is a result of it. You discover who you are by watching how you respond when life challenges you, not by imagining it in isolation. The mind loves to demand certainty, but life offers none. It offers experience instead, and experience requires participation. When you act, you enter a living process, you receive feedback, you adjust, you learn. This loop cannot exist in the realm of thought alone. Doubt often disguises itself as self-awareness. It says, you're just being realistic or you need more time. But realism does not mean paralysis. Awareness does not require avoidance. In fact, awareness deepens through engagement, not withdrawal. There is a subtle difference between patience and postponement. Patience listens, postponement hides. Patience waits while staying present. Postponement waits to avoid feeling. Many people confuse the two and call it wisdom, when it is actually fear trying to stay comfortable. Action, even small action, breaks the spell. It brings you back into the body, into the moment, into the reality of what is happening rather than what might happen. And in this reality, things are rarely as extreme as the mind predicts. Problems become concrete instead of abstract. Challenges become tasks instead of threats. Confidence grows quietly through these encounters, not as a dramatic transformation, but as a steady recognition, I can handle this. Each time you move, you gather evidence of your own resilience. Without movement, that evidence never accumulates. Life does not reward perfection. It responds to honesty, to effort, to presence. It meets you where you show up, not where you imagine yourself someday being. Waiting to feel ready is like waiting for the tide to stop before you enter the sea. The tide never stops. You learn to move with it. The deeper cost of doubt is not failure, it is disconnection. Disconnection from your own energy, your instincts, your creativity. When you delay expression for too long, you begin to feel distant from yourself. Not because something is wrong, but because something essential is being withheld. When you stop doubting and start doing, you reconnect. You return to the flow of cause and response, action and learning. Life becomes dynamic again, alive, not controlled, not guaranteed, but real. And in that reality, a simple truth reveals itself. You were never meant to wait until you were certain. You were meant to move while uncertain. Because movement is not the reward at the end of confidence. It is the source of it.